Hello, dear friends. Today I'm going to tell you a story that happened in my life 3 years ago. A story about how a single moment can turn your whole life upside down, and about how the intuition of our loved ones can sometimes save us from terrible mistakes. I ask you to please give this story a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is very important to me. My name is Taylor. I am 35 years old. Back then I was 32, but that's not the point. The point is the day that should have been the happiest of my life, but turned into a true nightmare. My wedding day. I stood in front of the mirror in my snow-white dress, which I had spent a whole month picking out. Lace on the bodice, a long satin train, the veil embroidered with pearls. Everything was perfect. The makeup artist had just finished my makeup, and I hardly recognized myself. My eyes were shining, my lips were glistening. I looked like I was straight out of a bridal magazine. Through the window of the hotel room, the view stretched out over the city park. The trees wore their golden autumn foliage. The October day was warm and sunny, as if the sky itself was blessing our union. "Tay, you look absolutely beautiful," exclaimed my friend Jenna, who was my maid of honor, clapping her hands together. "Leonard will be completely blown away when he sees you." I smiled, although a strange unease settled in my chest. No, not fear of marriage, but rather a nagging feeling of incompleteness. I missed my mother so much. She had died giving birth to me, and I had never seen her face, except in old photographs. My father raised me alone, and he did an excellent job of it. Stephen wasn't just my father. He was my best friend, my advisor, my rock. But 3 years ago, he was taken from me. A car accident on the highway. A truck had swerved into the oncoming lane. My father's car was completely crushed. They told me at the medical examiner's office that the body could only be identified by his documents. I never saw him again, and that was probably for the best. But the pain of the loss still lived inside me like a sharp splinter. After my father's death, I was alone. All alone. We had hardly any relatives. My father's mother, my grandmother, had died before I was born, and my mother's family was small. My great-grandmother, Elsa. My grandmother's mother lived somewhere in the country, but I hadn't seen her since my childhood and barely remembered her. There were no other relatives. In exchange, I had a large inheritance from my father. 3 condos in a prime city location, a country house, shares in a construction firm. My father was a successful entrepreneur, had worked hard his whole life, and left everything to me, his only daughter. The first year after his death, it felt as if I had fallen into a black hole. I went to work at the bank, where I was a senior loan officer, came home, ate something or other, and fell asleep crying. I thought life was over, that there would never be happiness again. And then I met Leonard. It happened at a business conference I was attending for work. He was giving a lecture on new methods of project management, a tall, stately man in his mid-30s, with a confident way of speaking and a charisma you could feel even through the screen. After the conference, we ran into each other by chance in the lobby. He spilled coffee on me. I flinched. Chaos ensued with napkins and apologies. "Please excuse me," Leonard repeated, dabbing at the stain on my blazer. "I'm so clumsy. Please allow me to at least pay for your dry cleaning. Or better yet, let me take you to dinner as an apology." I had to laugh. For the first time in a year, I laughed properly, and I agreed. Thus began our story. Leonard turned out to be the owner of a small but successful consulting firm. He was attentive, courteous, and a good listener. In the second week of our acquaintance, he sent me a huge bouquet of white roses. In the third, he took me to a spa resort for the weekend. After a month, we were inseparable. He didn't pressure me, didn't push. He was just there. When I was feeling down, he would come over in the middle of the night and stay with me until morning. When I cried, he would hold me in silence. He filled the void that had been created after my father's death. No, he didn't replace my father. No one could. But he gave me the feeling that I was no longer alone in this world. After 6 months, Leonard proposed to me. Romantically, with a ring and candles on the rooftop terrace of a restaurant. I said yes without hesitation. I believed it was fate, that my father in heaven was giving his blessing. Leonard introduced me to his mother, Martina. She was a woman in her 60s with a perfect hairstyle, expensive clothes, and the demeanor of a socialite, the owner of a large real estate agency. She was used to giving orders and getting her way. At our first meeting, she looked me up and down appraisingly, like merchandise in a shop window. "So, you're Taylor. she said in a cold tone. "Leonard has told me a lot about you. I hope you are aware that you are marrying a man of a certain social standing. I hope you will not embarrass him." I was taken aback, but said nothing. Leonard apologized for his mother later, saying she was just worried about her son, and that she was actually very warm-hearted. I believed it. I wanted to believe it. We began the wedding preparations. Martina took charge of everything, chose the restaurant, the florist, the musicians. I protested, said I wanted something simpler, but she waved it off. "Don't be ridiculous, darling. Myson's wedding must be first class. You don't want people talking, saying he married some beggar." Leonard just shrugged and asked me to ignore it. He said his mother was used to being in control, but that she meant well for us. I gave in, and then this day arrived, the wedding day. The restaurant was magnificent. A huge hall with crystal chandeliers, tables overflowing with flowers, an orchestra playing classical music. About 150 guests had come, most of them from the groom's side. I only had colleagues from work and a few friends. Martina presided at the main table with the air of a queen receiving her subjects. The ceremony went perfectly. Leonard stood before me in his elegant suit, his eyes glistening. When we exchanged rings, the guests applauded. I felt tears running down my cheeks. Tears of happiness, I thought. The banquet began. Toasts, congratulations, music. I drank champagne and smiled, even though something inside me was tightening. I couldn't understand what was wrong. Apparently everything was wonderful. Apparently I was happy, but a vague uneasiness wouldn't leave me. And then I noticed the glances. Martina was exchanging glances with Leonard. Quick, short glances, full of mutual understanding. She smiled a cold, predatory smile. He nodded almost imperceptibly, as if a silent conversation was taking place between them, hidden from everyone else. I felt sick. I turned away, trying to banish the dark thoughts. They're just happy, I told myself. A mother is just proud of her son. But the fear didn't subside. The guests continued to celebrate. Some were dancing, some were drinking, some were making the next toast. I sat there, smiling mechanically, while the thoughts swirled in my head. And suddenly, there was a commotion at the entrance to the hall. I turned around and froze. In the doorway stood an old woman, very old. Her face was etched with deep wrinkles. Her back was bent, her hands trembled, but her eyes were alive, piercing, full of determination. She wore a simple dark dress, a knitted shawl over her shoulders. She leaned on a cane and looked directly at me. My great-grandmother Elsa. I hadn't seen her in at least 20 years, maybe longer. I only vaguely remembered a loving old woman who smelled of herbs and baked delicious spiced cookies, but that was so long ago it seemed like a dream. "Tay!" she called out in a trembling voice. "Tay, my granddaughter." The hall fell silent. The guests turned around, the music stopped. Leonard jumped up, his face distorted. "Who was that?" he asked sharply. "My great-grandmother," I whispered, standing up. "My God, where did she come from?" My great-grandmother moved slowly through the hall toward me. People stepped back, following her with surprised looks. I also walked toward her. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear the beat in my ears. "Grandma Elsa," I said, hugging her fragile shoulders. "How did you find me? How did you know?" She didn't answer. Instead, her frail hand gripped my wrist with unexpected strength. I flinched in pain. My great-grandmother pulled me closer and stared into my eyes. "Tay!" she hissed so quietly that only I could hear. "Run away from him. Now. Your father, who you were told was dead, is waiting for you in a car outside." The world swayed around me. I felt the blood drain from my head, my legs go numb. "What?" I gasped. "What are you talking about?" "Your father is alive," my great-grandmother's voice broke. "He's out there, beyond the door. Run before it's too late. They want to kill you." "Hey, Grandma?" Leonard was beside us, grabbing my great-grandmother by the shoulder. "What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind?" He tried to pull her away from me, but my great-grandmother clung to my arm with desperate strength. Her face was chalk white, her lips trembling. "Tay, I'm begging you." "Believe me, run!" Martina was already approaching us with purposeful strides. Her face was frozen in a contemptuous mask. "Get this crazy old woman out of here," she hissed at one of the security guards. "She's ruining the party." Two burly men in black suits moved toward us. I saw their hands reaching for my great-grandmother. I saw the fear in her eyes. Real animalistic fear. And then I saw something else. Panic flickered across Leonard's face. Just for a second, just for an instant, but I noticed it. And in Martina's eyes, such malice flashed that I became terrified. Instinct worked faster than my mind. I ran for the exit. "Tay!" "Leonard, where are you going?" But I was already running. The dress got tangled between my legs. The veil slipped. The high heels clattered on the parquet floor. I heard shouts behind me, the pounding of feet, but I didn't turn around. My heart was hammering, my breath catching. In my head, only one voice echoed. "Dad is alive. Dad is waiting for you." I burst out of the restaurant into the warm October evening. It had gotten dark. The streetlights cast yellow circles of light on the asphalt. Several cars were parked at the curb, and one of them, a black sedan, looked familiar. Dad's car, the same one they told me he had died in. The door flew open, a man got out, and I screamed. It was my father. Stephen stood before me, alive, older, changed, but alive. His face was crisscrossed with scars I didn't remember. Gray hair was streaked thickly through his dark hair. He was thinner, gaunt, but his eyes were the same. Kind, familiar Dad's eyes. "Taylor," he said hoarsely, his voice breaking. "My daughter." I rushed toward him. I don't remember how I crossed the distance, how I ended up in his arms. I was crying, yelling something incoherent, clinging to him, afraid he was a mirage, that he would disappear again. Dad, how is this possible?" I sobbed against his chest. "They told me you were dead. I buried you." "No time for explanations," he interrupted me. He grabbed me by the shoulders, looked me in the eyes. "Tay, we have to go. Now. They're coming after you." As if to confirm his words, Leonard and 2 security guards burst out of the restaurant door. My groom looked furious, his face red, his tie askew. "Taylor, come back here right now," he roared. "What are you doing? Get in." My father tore open the back door, practically pushed me inside. Leonard was running toward us. My father scrambled into the driver's seat, started the engine. The car shot forward with screeching tires. I looked back through the rear window. Leonard was standing in the middle of the street. His mouth was screaming something, but I couldn't hear the words anymore. We sped through the night at a breakneck pace. My father drove erratically, constantly checking the rearview mirror. I sat pressed against the seat and couldn't utter a word. The shock paralyzed me. Everything seemed like an insane dream. "Dad?" I finally forced out. "What is happening?" "How are you? Why are you?" "They wanted to kill me, Tay," he said, without taking his eyes off the road. Leonard and his mother. 3 years ago, they staged the car accident. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "How did you survive?" "They told me you died instantly." "That was the plan," he answered grimly. "But I got lucky." The truck hit the car, and I was thrown into the ditch. I lay in the bushes until the ambulance came. I didn't wake up until 2 months later in the hospital. The doctor said it was a miracle I survived. He turned into an alley, then another. We drove to the outskirts of the city where the industrial park began. When I came to, my father continued, I started to remember. The brakes failed suddenly. I knew I had checked the car that morning. Everything was fine. And then I remembered I had been at the auto shop the day before, the exact one your Leonard had recommended to me. "No," I whispered. "That can't be." "Yes, my daughter." My father finally stopped the car in front of an old warehouse, turned off the engine, and turned to me. His face was serious. I started digging. I found out the auto shop belongs to a relative of Martina's. I found the mechanic, who confessed in exchange for payment. They had paid him to only partially sever the brake line, so the brake fluid would leak out at high speed. I covered my face with my hands. I felt dizzy. But why? Why would they want to kill you? "Because of the real estate," my father said harshly. "Because of the money. Tay, you know how much we own. 3 condos downtown. The house, the company, several $1,000,000. They wanted to get rid of me so everything would go to you, and then have their son marry you to get access to the money. And after that," he didn't finish his sentence, but I understood. "Kill me," I finished for him. My voice sounded strangely foreign, mechanical. "Yes, they needed you alone, unprotected. First, they eliminated me, then they waited until you had overcome the shock. And after a 1.5 years, Leonard accidentally met you." I remembered the day of the conference, the spilled coffee, his apologies, the invitation to dinner. Was it really all staged? I figured it out too late, my father continued. When I woke up in the hospital, I decided I had to stay dead, otherwise they would have just tried again. I was discharged under a false name, went into hiding, gathered evidence, hired a private investigator, and we've uncovered a lot. He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a thick folder with documents and handed it to me. Look. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Photos, printouts of phone records, bank statements. I saw pictures of Leonard meeting with some men in dark alleys. I saw transfers of large sums from Martina's account to offshore accounts. And then I saw the photo of a young woman. Young, pretty, with long blonde hair. She was laughing, sitting across from Leonard in a coffee shop. He was holding her hand. Beneath the photo was the name, Laura Hoffman. Who is this? I asked, although I already felt ice cold inside. Leonard's previous fiancée, my father answered quietly. She was the sole heiress. Her parents owned several rental properties downtown. They died in a fire when Laura was 25. 6 months later, she met Leonard. Another 6 months later, they got married. I turned the page. Next photo. The same young woman in a wedding dress, happy, radiant. Beside her, Leonard in a suit, the same one he wore today at our wedding. What happened to her? They went on their honeymoon to the coast, rented a villa with a pool. On the third day, Laura drowned. Leonard called the police, cried, said she had been drinking, went for a swim at night, and he had fallen asleep and didn't notice. My breath caught. The police ruled it an accident, my father continued. Leonard inherited his wife's entire fortune, sold the properties, invested the money, and after a year, began looking for a new victim. I looked at Laura's photo and saw myself. The lonely heiress, the easy prey. Their scheme has been perfected over years, my father said. Martina owns the real estate agency. She has access to databases, to information about properties. She finds lonely women with large inheritances. Leonard meets them, woos them, marries them, then accidents happen. They take everything and look for the next victim. But Laura, why didn't anyone suspect anything? Oh, they did. Her cousin didn't believe it was an accident, filed a report, demanded an investigation, but the investigators found nothing. There was no evidence, and Leonard and his mother know how to cover their tracks. They have connections, money, experience. My father took my hand. Tay, I've spent over 2 years gathering this evidence. I had them followed, recorded conversations, searched for witnesses, but their methods are almost perfect. They are careful. I couldn't just go to the police without watertight proof. They would have noticed, tied up loose ends, and disappeared. Then why now? Why did you show up today of all days? Because I only found out about the wedding a month ago, my father said, exhausted. I was in another city tracking one of their accomplices. When I came back and learned you were getting married, I almost went crazy. I knew there was no time left, that they would act quickly after the wedding. How did you know that? From their correspondence. My investigator hacked Martina's emails. The entire plan was in there. After the wedding, you were supposed to go on a honeymoon on a yacht on the open sea, and the same thing that happened to Laura was supposed to happen there. You would have fallen overboard. Leonard would have raised the alarm, but too late. The current would have taken the body, a tragic accident, and the grieving widower inherits his young wife's entire fortune. I felt sick. I opened the car door, jumped out, and doubled over. I threw up right onto the asphalt while my father held me by the shoulders. When the wave passed, I got back into the car and wiped my mouth with the end of my veil. How did you find great-grandmother Elsa? I asked hoarsely. She was the only relative I could trust, my father answered. I tracked her down in the country a month ago, told her everything. She agreed to help. We worked out a plan. She would come to the wedding and warn you. I was afraid that if I showed up myself, it would cause a panic and they would try to flee. But great-grandmother could go in unnoticed. No one would have stopped her. Where is she now? My associate took her to safety. She's safe, but we have to act immediately, Tay. By now, Leonard and his mother have realized the plan has failed. They might try to disappear, to destroy evidence. We have to go back, present the evidence, hand it over to the police. I looked at him. My father, whom I had believed to be dead for 3 years. My father, who had been fighting this whole time to save me. What do I do? I asked. We're going back to the wedding. I've already arranged everything with the detectives and a lead detective I trust. They'll be waiting for us outside the restaurant. We'll go inside. You will publicly accuse Leonard and his mother in front of witnesses, Before they can flee, the detectives will hand over all the documents to the police. And if they try to talk their way out of it to lie, we have recordings of their conversations. The mechanic's testimony, the one who cut the brakes, bank transfers, connections to criminal activity, the testimony from Laura's cousin, Ina. It's enough to launch an official investigation. And then they can't hide anymore. They'll be taken into custody. I nodded. Anger ignited in my chest. This man, whom I had trusted, who had told me about love, he wanted to kill me, cold-bloodedly, calculatingly for money, just as he had killed Laura, just as he had tried to kill my father. Let's go, I said, resolved. I want to look them in the eyes when they realize they've lost. My father smiled. For the first time in a long time, a half smile appeared on his face. That's my girl, he said proudly. We returned to the restaurant 40 minutes later. 2 cars were already parked out front, a sedan and an SUV. 3 men in plain clothes got out. One of them, a gray-haired man around 50, walked up to us. Mr. Stephen, I'm Detective Brand. We're ready. My father nodded, handing him the folder of documents. It's all in here. Recordings, statements, testimony. Can you arrest them? If the lady confirms her statement and accuses them publicly, then yes, the detective replied. We'll have grounds for an arrest, and after that, the review of the documents, the verification of the statements. If everything is as you say, they'll be going to prison for a long time. I straightened up, smoothing my wrinkled dress. Then let's go. We entered the hall together. Me, my father, the detective, and the 2 other officers. The guests were still there, but the celebration was obviously over. People were sitting around confused, whispering. Leonard was standing at the head table next to his mother, talking on the phone. When he saw us, he froze. Martina turned pale. For the first time, I saw her look frightened. Tay! Leonard rushed toward me. Thank God you're back. What is this madness? Who is this man? This man is my father, I said loudly, so everyone could hear. The man you tried to murder 3 years ago. The hall went still. Someone gasped. The musicians stopped playing. What are you talking about? Leonard tried to smile, but it looked pathetic. Tay, you're in shock. You've been misled. Stop lying, I interrupted him. I know everything. I know about the auto shop where the brakes were cut. I know about Laura Hoffman, your previous wife, who drowned on her honeymoon. I know about your and your mother's scheme to find rich single women, marry them and kill them for the inheritance. The guests murmured. Martina clutched her heart. That's a lie, she screamed. Utter nonsense. This imposter comes from out of nowhere and confuses the girl. I am not an imposter, my father said calmly. We can do a DNA test immediately. I'm ready. And are you ready to explain to the detective why money from that exact auto shop ended up in your bank account? Detective Brand pulled out his badge. I'm Detective Brand from the DA's office. Leonard Volk and Martina Volk. You are both under suspicion of attempted murder and fraud. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Voluntarily, or should we do this at the station? Leonard recoiled. His face contorted. The charming mask fell away, and I saw the real person, a cold, calculating predator. This is a setup, he hissed between his teeth. Someone is trying to frame us. Mom, don't say anything without a lawyer. Martina was already pulling out her phone, but Detective Brand shook his head. You can call a lawyer, that's your right. But we're asking you to accompany us now for questioning. We have reason to believe you are involved in a crime. What reason? Martina shouted. The words of a hysterical bride and some unknown man? This is absurd. I have connections. I'll call my lawyer, and you will regret ever showing up here. We have recordings of your phone conversations, one of the other detectives said calmly, in which you and your son discussed the plan to eliminate the bride during the honeymoon. There are bank statements showing transfers to the auto shop where Greg Richter works, the mechanic who was paid to sever the brake line in Stephen's car. We have the testimony of that mechanic, who is willing to talk in exchange for a reduced sentence. Martina turned even paler. Leonard clenched his fists. My mother has nothing to do with this, he said unexpectedly. It was all me. I organized everything. She didn't know. Shut your mouth, his mother hissed at him. Be quiet until the lawyer gets here. But Leonard continued, the words pouring out of him. She forced me. She said we were poor, that we needed money, that I had to marry rich fools. She found them, planned everything, and I just did what she said. You are a complete idiot. Martina lunged to slap her son, but one of the detectives restrained her. The guests stared at the scene with open mouths. Someone was filming it all on their phone. My friend Jenna sat pale, her hand over her mouth. You're both coming with us, Detective Brand said firmly, and we'll sort this out at the station. If you're innocent, you'll prove it. But for now, we have enough grounds for an arrest. He nodded to the detectives, and they pulled out handcuffs. This is illegal! Martina screamed as the metal clicked around her wrists. I'm going to file a complaint. I have friends in the DA's office, in the city administration. You will all lose your jobs. Leonard was silent. He looked at me, and his eyes seethed with hatred. You fool, he said quietly. You could have enjoyed your life, not worried about a thing. I would have made it quick. You wouldn't have suffered. And now, everything is ruined. I shuddered. There he was, the real Leonard, the man who had cold-bloodedly planned my murder and was talking about it as if it were an everyday inconvenience. You're a monster, I said. Did you kill Laura? Did you try to murder my father? How many other victims are there? He smirked but didn't answer. The detectives led him toward the exit. Martina was still screaming something about lawyers and connections, but she too was escorted out of the hall. When the doors closed behind them, silence fell in the hall. Then one of the guests stood up and began to applaud. Others joined in. After a minute, the entire hall was clapping. I stood there, not knowing whether to cry or laugh. My father hugged me. It's over, my daughter, he said softly. It's over. Detective Brand came up to us. We'll need your statements. Officially on the record, Mr. Stephen, you'll need to do a DNA test to confirm the relationship, although frankly, one look at you both is enough to understand you are father and daughter. When should I come? I asked. Tomorrow, the day after. Call me. He handed me a business card. We will document everything that happened, with your statements, the conversation recordings, and the mechanic's testimony. We will build the case. They won't be getting out anytime soon. My father nodded. Thank you. Without you, I don't know how this all would have ended. Brand shrugged. I'm just doing my job, but I'm glad we were in time. He left, and we remained with my father in the hall where my wedding had been celebrated just a short time before. The guests gradually left the room, casting curious glances at us. Jenna came over and hugged me. Tay, I don't know what to say, she murmured. This is all so crazy. I'm just glad you're safe. Thanks, I whispered. Sorry for the ruined evening. Oh, please. This is the most unbelievable story, although of course terrible. That Leonard. I always had a feeling something was off about him, but I thought I was being oversensitive. She left, and I was left alone with my father. We sat down at the empty table. I took off my veil, kicked off my shoes. My feet were throbbing. Dad, I said, why didn't you contact me sooner? Why didn't you tell me you were alive? He sighed. Tay, I couldn't. They were watching you. I know that for a fact. If I had shown up, they would have found out. They would have tried to kill me. Or you again. I had to stay dead to gather evidence and catch them. I know it was hard on you. Forgive me. I took his hand. You saved my life. I'm not angry. It's just so horrible. I almost married a murderer. But you didn't, my father said firmly. Great-grandmother Elsa warned you in time, and you were smart enough to believe her. I remembered great-grandmother. Where is she now? At a hotel. My associate is looking after her. She was worried sick about you. Do you want to go see her? I nodded. We arrived at a small hotel on the outskirts of the city. Great-grandmother Elsa was sitting in her room, wrapped in a blanket, drinking tea. When I entered, she clapped her hands together. Tay, thank God. I was so afraid they wouldn't let you go. I sat down next to her, hugged her fragile shoulders. Thank you, Grandma Elsa. You saved me. She stroked my head, just like in my childhood. I've always loved you, my child. When your father found me, told me everything, I agreed to help immediately. I couldn't let those villains destroy you. The three of us sat there, me, my father, and my great-grandmother, and drank tea. For the first time in 3 years, I felt that I had a family again. The next day, we went to the police, gave our statements. My father underwent the DNA test. The results came back 3 days later. A match, no doubt whatsoever. Leonard and Martina were formally arrested. The trial began. The lawyers they hired tried to get them off, but there was too much evidence. The mechanic, Greg Richter, gave detailed testimony about how Martina had come to his auto shop and offered him a large sum of money for a small job. He admitted to severing the brakes on my father's car. He was convicted too, but received a suspended sentence for cooperating with the investigators. The analysis of the recordings confirmed that the voices on the tapes indeed belonged to Leonard and his mother. They discussed the murder plan, divided up the future inheritance, argued over the details of staging the accident. The investigators reopened the Laura Hoffman case. An analysis showed that traces of sleeping pills were found in her blood at the time of death. The cause of death was reevaluated. Probable murder. Laura's cousin, Ina, came to the trial and cried as she testified. "I always knew he killed her," she said through tears. Laura wrote to me that she felt strange after they got married. Leonard insisted that she sign the properties over to him. He pressured her, manipulated her. And then that trip. And she drowned. I didn't believe it was an accident, but nobody listened to me. Everyone stared at her. The judge, the jury, the journalists. The trial was widely covered in the media. "The Black Widow and her murderer son," wrote the newspapers. "The murderous real estate dealer hunted rich brides," screamed the headlines. Martina tried to use her connections, called high-ranking officials she knew, demanded intervention, but the case was too public. She couldn't get out of it. One by one, her friends turned their backs on her. Leonard's behavior in court varied. At first, he denied everything. Then he tried to shift the blame onto his mother. Then he fell silent again. The lawyers fought, but there was no chance. The trial lasted 3 months. During that time, the investigators found another victim, a woman named Miriam, whom Leonard had met 4 years prior, but who had ended the relationship when he started demanding access to her accounts. She testified about his strange behavior, about the pressure, about how he tried to isolate her from friends and family. The verdict was delivered at the end of winter. Leonard Volk. Life in prison for the murder of Laura Hoffman and the attempted murder of Stephen, as well as fraud in a particularly egregious case. Martina Volk. 20 years in prison under enhanced conditions for accessory to murder and organizing a criminal enterprise. When the judge read the verdict, Martina collapsed, screaming that it was unfair, that she had been framed, that she was innocent. The guards led her from the courtroom. Leonard looked at me for a long, hard moment. Then he grinned and said, "You're still alone. Your father won't live forever." The guards led him away. I watched him go and felt only relief. It was all over. The nightmare was in the past. After the trial, I took care of the documents. My father was officially alive again. But in those 3 years, a lot of bureaucratic problems had piled up. He had to get his ID, his driver's license, and his bank accounts reinstated. I helped him with everything. At the same time, I sorted out the inheritance matters. I decided to sell some of the real estate. 3 condos downtown were too much for just the 2 of us. I divided the proceeds from the sale. I gave a portion to Laura Hoffman's family as compensation. I donated a portion to a relief fund for fraud victims, and I started my own charitable foundation. I called it Second Life, in honor of my father, who had been given a second chance. The foundation helped women who had become victims of domestic violence and con artists. We provided legal advice, helped with finding housing, and offered psychological support. My father recovered slowly. 3 years on the run and under stress had not left him unscathed. He went to doctors, underwent checkups. A psychologist worked with him on his post-traumatic stress disorder. But he got better every day. He started to smile, to make jokes, to take an interest in life. Great-grandmother Elsa moved in with us. She was already 92, and living alone in the country was difficult for her. We set up a room for her on the ground floor of our house so she wouldn't have to climb stairs. She cooked, knitted, and told stories from her youth. The house filled with warmth and life. 2 years have passed. I'm standing at the window of my office at the foundation. Outside, it's spring. The city is waking up after the winter. On my desk is the report on our work for the past year. We have helped 130 women. Some received legal advice. Some temporary housing. Some psychological support. Every story is unique. Every fate is important. I haven't gotten married. I'm not in a hurry. After everything that happened, I find it hard to trust people. There have been men who showed interest, but I'm not ready yet. Maybe someday, maybe not. I feel happy even without romantic relationships. My father works with me at the foundation, handles the finances, reviews documents. He says it gives him a sense of purpose. helping other people avoid what we went through. Great-grandmother is still with us. At 94, she's spry and sharp-tongued. Yesterday, she told me, "Taylor, the most important thing in life is to listen to your heart and not be afraid to run away when something goes wrong." You ran away from that wedding just in time, didn't you? I smiled at her. Yes, I ran away and it saved my life. Life gradually returned to normal, like a river returning to its quiet bed after a turbulent flood. But some scars remained. Sometimes I had nightmares. I'm standing in the white dress and Leonard is pulling me by the arm toward the edge of an abyss. I would wake up drenched in sweat, and my father would hear my screams from his room, come over, and sit with me until I calmed down. "It will pass, my daughter," he'd say. "Time heals all wounds. I know that from my own experience." And he was right. With each month, the nightmares became less frequent. I learned to live with this experience without letting it destroy my present. The work at the foundation helped. When you see the pain of others, when you help other people get out of the traps they've fallen into, your own wounds heal faster. I met women who had been through much worse. Years of domestic violence, financial schemes, threats to their lives. And they found the strength to start over. It was inspiring. One of our clients, Sabine, became my friend. She was 45. She had lived for 20 years with a tyrannical husband who took all her money, isolated her from friends and family, and beat her. When she finally left him, he tried to sue for the apartment she had inherited from her parents. Our lawyers helped her win the case. Sabine kept the apartment, filed for divorce, and started working. "You know, Taylor," she told me one day over tea, "the worst part isn't the beatings. The worst part is when you stop believing you deserve something better. When you get used to the idea that this is just how it has to be. You helped me understand that I don't have to put up with it. That I have a choice." I hugged her. We all have a choice. Sometimes we just forget it. My father changed too. In the first few months after his return, he was withdrawn, tense. He would jump at sudden noises, constantly looking around. 3 years on the run had left their mark, but the psychotherapy helped. The doctor explained to me that my father had suffered a severe trauma, the attempted murder, the need to hide, the fear for my life. All of that didn't just disappear, but gradually he thawed, started to take an interest in the business again, to talk to people. We reinstated his shares in the construction firm, which had continued to operate in the 3 years without him. It turned out the partners had managed the business well. The profits grew. My father returned to work, but no longer with the same fanaticism as before. He learned to appreciate the simple things. Family dinners, walks in the park, conversations with great-grandmother. Great-grandmother Elsa became the center of our little world. Despite her age, she was astonishingly lively and sharp-witted. Every evening we gathered at the table, me, my father, great-grandmother, and had dinner together. She told stories from her life, about the war, about the post-war years, about how she had built her life in a devastated country. "You young people think your problems are the worst," she'd say, sipping her tea. "But we survived hunger, bombings, losses. And what of it? We survived. The most important thing is to stick together. Family is all we have." She was right. Family turned out to be the most important thing. Money, real estate, career, all of that was secondary. The most important thing is the people who truly love you, not because of your inheritance, but for who you are. Sometimes I thought about Leonard. I wondered what he thought about in his cell. Did he regret his actions or just getting caught? Probably the latter. Remorse is foreign to people like that. For them, other people are just tools, means to an end. Once, about a year after the trial, his lawyer called me and said Leonard wanted to see me. He was requesting a meeting at the prison. "Why?" I asked. "I don't know. He won't explain. He says he has to tell you something important." I thought about it for a long time. I asked my father what I should do. He shrugged. "You have to decide, Taylor. If you feel like you need to see him, then see him. If not, don't. You don't owe him anything." I declined. I saw no point in it. Whatever he wanted to say, it didn't matter anymore. This story was over. I was moving on. The foundation grew. 2 years after opening, we already had 5 full-time employees, 2 lawyers, a psychologist, a social worker, and an accountant. We rented a small office downtown, set up a reception area for clients there. On the walls hung photos of women we had helped, with their permission, of course. Each photo was a story of victory over circumstances. Journalists came to me asking for interviews. I told my story, how I almost became a victim of con artists, how I was saved, how I decided to help others. Articles appeared in newspapers and on the internet. This drew attention to the problem, and more people turned to us. Some sent donations, some $10, some $100, some $1,000. Every dollar went into the work. We paid for legal services for those who couldn't afford a lawyer. We rented temporary housing for women who had fled from abusive husbands. We paid for psychology sessions. We had one client, Sabine, who particularly stuck in my memory. She was only 28, had 2 children. Her husband drank and beat her. When she came to us, she had bruises on her face. Her hands were shaking. She was afraid of her own shadow, of loud noises, of men's voices. "I want to leave him," she cried. "But I have nowhere to go. The apartment is his. I have no money. The children are little. He says if I leave, he'll find me and kill me and the children too." We helped her. Our lawyers filed a police report, obtained a restraining order, and found her a place in a crisis center, where she lived with her children for 3 months. We helped her find a job and apply for welfare. Her husband tried to find her, came to our office, made threats. We called the police. He was arrested for violating the restraining order. He got 15 days in jail. During that time, Sabine found her courage, rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, put the children in daycare, and filed for divorce. I was with her at the final court hearing. Her husband tried to pressure her, make demands, threaten her, but the judge was on our side. The divorce was finalized, child support payments were set, and contact with the children was only permitted in the presence of a representative from social services. Sabine cried after the hearing, but they were tears of relief. "Thank you," she said, hugging me. "You saved my life, mine and my children's." "You saved yourself," I answered. "You found the strength to leave. That's the most important thing." There were many stories like that, each unique, each painful, but all ended with a victory. Women left tyrants, ended toxic relationships, took their lives back, and every time I felt as happy as if the victory were my own. My father sometimes told me, "Taylor, you've changed. You've become stronger, more confident. I'm proud of you." He was right. I had changed. What had happened 3 years ago had broken me, but I put myself back together, piece by piece, and became someone else. More cautious but not cynical. More discerning with people but not cruel. I learned to recognize manipulation, to see the warning signs in behavior, to trust my intuition, and I learned to appreciate what I have. Every morning when I wake up, I thank fate that I'm alive, that my father is by my side, that great-grandmother was there in time and warned me, that I have the opportunity to help others. As for my private life, I haven't completely shut myself off from men. There were random encounters, a few dates. One man, Jonas, a programmer, nice and smart, pursued me for a few months. We went to the movies, to coffee shops, on walks. But when he tried to take it further, suggested moving in together, I got scared. I realized I wasn't ready to let someone that close yet. "I'm sorry," I told him. "I need time. Maybe a lot of time." Jonas was offended, stopped calling. I was sad, but I didn't regret it. Better to be alone than to rush into a relationship out of fear of being alone. Great-grandmother told me, "Don't rush, my child. True love will find you on its own when you're ready. And until then, live for yourself, for your family, for your work. You have time." And so I lived. I worked at the foundation, met with people, traveled. My father and I went to the ocean, then to the mountains. For the first time in many years, he truly relaxed. We sat on the beach watching the sunset, and he said, "You know, Taylor, when I was in a coma after the accident, I had a dream. It was like I was walking through a long tunnel, and at the end there was light, and a voice told me, 'Not yet. You are still needed.' Back then, I didn't understand what it meant, but now I know. I was needed to save you." I took his hand. "I always needed you, Dad, and I always will." We sat there in silence, listening to the sound of the waves, and I felt happy, truly happy, despite all the ordeals. Another 6 months went by. Great-grandmother turned 95. We threw a big family party. We invited distant relatives I barely knew, neighbors, my colleagues from the foundation. Great-grandmother sat at the head of the table in a fancy dress, smiling and accepting congratulations. 95 years, she said, shaking her head. Who would have thought I'd lived to see it? I survived the war, the hunger, the oppression. I lost my husband, my son, my granddaughter. But here you sit, my dears. She looked at me and my father, and I see that not all of it was in vain. That evening, she told stories from her life. How she had met my great-grandfather at a dance. How they had married a month later and lived together for 50 years. How they survived the war, he at the front, she at home. How they had built their house themselves after the war. Life is no fairy tale, she said. There will be pain, loss, injustice. But if you can love, if you have family by your side, you can endure anything. The most important thing is to not give up and not let yourself be beaten down. Those words became a life motto for me. Don't give up. Don't let yourself be beaten down, love. Cherish your loved ones. Help those who are weaker. Now, 3 years after that disastrous wedding, I can say I am happy. Not the naive, rose-colored happiness from before, but a mature, conscious happiness. I know that the world is cruel, that there are people who are willing to exploit others for their own gain. But I also know that there is good, honesty, love. My father is healthy, working, enjoying life. Great-grandmother is with us, spry and cheerful. The foundation is helping people. I have a purpose. I have a goal. And I have hope that someday I will meet a man I can truly trust. And if not, that's okay too. I'm not alone. I have my family. Leonard and Martina are serving their sentences in maximum security prisons. Sometimes I think about them. I wonder if they've changed, if they've understood what they've done. Probably not. Remorse is foreign to people like that. But that's not my problem anymore. I've let go of the horror. Forgiven? No, but I've let it go. I've stopped replaying in my head what could have been. If great-grandmother hadn't shown up at the wedding, if I hadn't believed her, if my father hadn't survived. It happened the way it happened, and I'm grateful for that lesson. Cruel, painful, but important. It taught me to trust my intuition, to vet people, not to rush, to appreciate the present. Recently, I spoke at a conference on the protection of women's rights, told my story in front of a room full of people. When I finished, a young woman, about 20 years old, came up to me. Her eyes were full of tears. "Thank you," she said in a trembling voice. "I'm in a similar situation. The boyfriend I'm with is pressuring me, demanding access to my accounts. I felt like something was wrong, but I was afraid of seeming paranoid. Now I understand. I have to leave before it's too late." I hugged her. "Go, don't wait until it's too late. Trust your feelings. They are not deceiving you." She left, and I stood there thinking, this is what makes life worth living, to save, to warn, to help at least one person. On the evening of that same day, I was sitting at home with my father and great-grandmother. We were drinking tea and talking about trivial things. Outside it was raining. Wood was crackling in the fireplace. Great-grandmother was knitting another scarf. My father was reading the newspaper. I looked at them and knew this is true happiness. Not in luxury, not in romance, not in fairy tale stories, but in the warmth of one's own home, in a quiet evening with loved ones, in the knowledge that you are needed and loved. Just because, not for money, not for the inheritance, but for the fact that you exist. Dear friends, if you have listened to my story to the end, I thank you. I didn't tell it to scare you, but to warn you. The world is full of different kinds of people. Among them are those who see others only for their own gain. Learn to recognize them. Trust your intuition. Don't ignore warning signs. And remember, people who are truly close to you love you unconditionally. They don't demand access to your accounts after 1 month of knowing you. They don't isolate you from family and friends. They don't push you into serious decisions. They don't pressure you, and they don't manipulate you. Take care of yourselves. Cherish those who are close to you, and never be afraid to run away if you sense danger. Just as I ran away from that wedding, that saved my life. Give it a like if the story touched you. Subscribe to Clara's Stories so you don't miss new narratives, and write in the comments what you think. Have you experienced similar situations? How did you react? In closing, I would like to make a heartfelt request. If you enjoy my stories and you want Clara's Stories to continue to exist, and for me to be able to tell you new, exciting experiences, I would be grateful for a small donation via the link in the description. Your support is incredibly valuable to me. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. See you soon, M.